This layout wasn't supposed to turn into anything special. There was no master plan, no blueprints other than an extremely rough drawing on some scrap paper and spur-of-the-moment ideas that slowly became Sudbury Junction. Along the way I made mistakes, from sewage-colored water to trackwork that looked more branch-line than mainline. It wasn't my plan, but it turned into something quite polished for an amateur. And it wasn't until the end of that layout when I realized I had outgrown both my home and my layout, and it was time for change. Let me show you how it all unfolded. So here's how it all began. After maybe 20 years away from the hobby as a teen, I started to buy the materials needed to get into the layout. It was also at this time I started to collect new rolling stock for the first time in a long time. With no idea of what I was doing, I built 3 benches with a plywood top, a mistake I now know. And from there, I built up my roadbed using foam chunks. Little did I know, but of course this was a mistake and was the cause of my wobbly track running. But slowly and surely I learned as I went and started making gains in more finicky bits like laying switches. And luckily for me, I started to see some real progress very quickly. Of course, it helps that the pandemic gave me endless time off to get things done and focus. The 2% grades that I had around these curves were another mistake I vowed not to replicate. Having said that, the yard was actually something that turned out quite successfully, one of my many wins along the way. I decided this was the time to make the change to DCC as well, which was the first nerve-wracking change that I had to simply buy into and take the plunge on. Starting to see scenes like these was such a hook, and it's when I started to get really excited about what I was creating. Then I made the mistake, or discovery, depending on the perspective of realism or my wallet, of DCC and sound. Thanks to this GMD1, my first sound locomotive. It was yet another moment I was blown away by what you could do in N-scale. As the pink foam landscape developed, first in chunks, then shaving it down and making quite a mess along the way. And next to the magic of Sculpt-A-Mold, my toy-like setup turned into a nicely formed landscape. More learning, but a base coat of paint should have been the time to put on some ground foam. Instead, loads of glue was needed later. Regardless, it added yet another level of realism, even if it was a little desert-like. From here, it turned into an art project, painting, layering colors, blending in visions of how water looks, whether it's shallow or deep. Again, these were All steps I dreaded starting because I had no clue what I was doing, but I'm grateful they all worked out as they needed to. Really, my mindset should have been that nature isn't perfect, so this shouldn't be either. Progress wasn't without hiccups, like the ballasting. It looked fantastic. Again, I had no idea what I was doing. But running my first train over the newly ballasted tracks made my stomach sink. My old early 2000s, well, I think, maybe someone can tell me when Kato actually made these things, but my Kato Canadian Pacific train did not like the mess I had made. But things kept progressing, and manufacturers seemed to be pumping out more and more unbelievable stuff. And I kept learning, including learning the benefits of a tripod for filming, and things kept stepping up, including my photography and filming skills. Adding tints to the water turned it exactly into what I envisioned. Little did I know, but more learning along the way. Once I'd finished that, I was able to run scenic trains riverside, like these very old Kato SD40s reflecting on the water. That was exactly what I liked about N-Scale. Large feeling modern trains running in nature. And then, continuing without a plan, I just started adding in details and more realistic rolling stock, like these Broadway Limited engines or the Microtrains cars. Lots of Rapido passenger equipment, and one touch at a time, things just kept getting better and better. By the end, I realized I had bit off a lot. I mean, this was my first layout, and I didn't know what I was doing about anything. But it all turned into learning that I could tuck aside for layout 2.0. Turns out I'd created something very scenic to run and rail fan, though I knew I had shortcomings in the design and implementation that I could fix on a new layout. Which brings me to today. Layout 2.0 is well underway, nearly 4 times the size, with most of the trackwork in place. I don't have the yard finished, and the city scene is still not completely tracked in. There's, of course, a lot of wiring work to do too, but it's hard to document that. This time, I'm building my layout not just for scenic running, but for operations too. Scenic running still, but I want some operations, which is something I had zero room for in layout 1.0 the way that I set it up. While that layout taught me a lot, layout 2.0 is where things are starting to get really interesting. I am very excited with the plan I've got in place and how things are shaping up. And I'm really looking forward to sharing my progress along the way. So, if you want to see how this one turns out, you're in the right place. Thanks for following the journey, and if you've been thinking about starting your own layout, sometimes you just have to take the plunge.